Welcome back, guys. Today I have a fantastic place to show you. This is the Meidai Lamasery, just outside of the capital city of Hohot in Inner Mongolia. Let's have a look. Welcome to Inner Mongolia in the north of China. Backing onto a steep mountain range, the Meidai Lamasery is a Tibetan Buddhist monastery located between the two major urban centres of Hohot and Baotou. The monastery is surrounded by a defensive wall complete with guard towers on each corner, and contained within are a number of important buildings, artifacts and lush gardens. Founded by Altan Khan in the 16th century, the Meidai Lamasery remains one of the most important Buddhist sites in Inner Mongolia, with its history and indeed the history of its founder having profound influence across the whole region. More on that later. First, let's look around. This behind me is called the Coloured Glazed Tile Hall, and it was built in 1566 for the use of Altan Khan when he lived here. Now it is a temple to the three Buddhas, that being the past, present and future Buddhas. You might be wondering why there is a Tibetan Buddhist temple in Inner Mongolia. In fact, there are many Tibetan Buddhist temples and lamaseries in Inner Mongolia. It's the main religion here. I'm going to tell you about that a little bit later on. So let's have a look around the monastery first, then we'll go up to this pagoda and a bit of story time, eh? Why not? It's a really lovely place to walk around. So this was a temple to the third Dalai Lama, who was actually he was the first to be given the title Dalai, and then obviously they went back and looked at two people before him and gave them the name posthumously. Surrounding the whole temple complex is a huge wall. It's fortified, and that was obviously to give it protection during particularly troubled times during the Ming Dynasty. It's about 600 meters around the wall. And as you can see, it's very Chinese in style. I mean, it looks like the city wall in Xi'an, or any old Chinese city actually. It's got watchtowers on all the corners. Pretty unusual for a temple. This is a really beautiful place to walk around and explore. It's not actually as big as I thought it was going to be, but it's quiet and peaceful, green and lovely. These beautiful mountains as the backdrop. As you can see, a white pagoda up on the top of the hill over there. We'll be climbing that later, don't worry about it. This lamasery was set up in the 1570s by the Mongol leader Altan Khan. We're going to talk about him a little bit later because he's quite an interesting figure, quite an important figure as well in Mongolian culture and history. This is the main hall behind me. No photos and videos in there, unfortunately. It's a beautiful building inside. It's got a huge Buddha. It is called the Big Buddha Hall. As well as the walls are covered in quite spectacular Ming Dynasty murals. Impressive place. Now, it might look like this is in the middle of nowhere, but actually it's not that difficult to get to. If you're in either Baotou, which is the biggest city in Inner Mongolia, or Hohot, the capital, this place is right in the middle, and it's on the highway if you're taking a bus or something, and also it's on the high-speed train between the two cities. From Hohot, I took the high-speed train, took 45 minutes I think, and you get to a little place called Salati, and from there I jumped in a taxi and it's about another 40 renminbi. So it's not actually that difficult. I was here by 10 AM. I was quite surprised how few people were visiting this site, but as I found throughout the rest of my Inner Mongolian journey, this would be a common theme. Inner Mongolia is a gigantic region of China, and outside of the few major cities is quite sparsely populated. This depends on how you like to travel, of course, but for me, the lack of souvenir stalls, restaurants and general tourist stuff is always a win. I've said it many times in my videos, but it is worth repeating. For a real China history experience, get out of the cities. Anyway,
Time to climb a load of steps.
Hello, sheep. We're outside the walls of the Lamasery now, and we're going to head up towards the White Pagoda. Not sure if it's old or new, to be honest. Let's go and have a look anyway. It's not that far, a couple of 100 meters up maybe.
And so the inevitable climb up to the pagoda begins, flights and flights of steps until finally reaching the bottom of the pagoda for the final push.
Maybe still building this thing. I guess it's very new. These are Tibetan prayer flags. It's a common sight if you are obviously in Tibet, but also in Qinghai, southern Gansu, northwestern Sichuan here. They are all over the place. The spread of Tibetan Buddhism is actually pretty huge, as it is very new. The question is, does it make my list? I think so. It looks amazing, you know, especially from when you're coming in on the train, you go right past it. It looks beautiful. Location wise, stunning. Climbing up in the heat, brutal. I think it makes a list. It's quite vast inside. Quite empty. Just spectacular. Wow. What a place Inner Mongolia is. Day one. I'm having a great time. I think it's only going to get better as well as I head further into the grassland area, further east. Looking forward to it, looking forward to it. Right, while we're walking down, let me tell you about Altan Khan, who I mentioned earlier. Altan Khan was the founder of the Meidai Lamasery. He was also the founder of the city of Hohot, which is now the capital of Inner Mongolia, where I'm staying today. He's a very, very, very interesting character and an important person with a very, very, very strong legacy. So, what did he do? Well, Altan Khan lived in the 16th century, and he was a descendant of Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan, and kind of fancied himself as, you know, following in their footsteps. He was a powerful leader, and he ruled the Tumed Mongols. Excuse my Mongolian pronunciation, I'm sure it's terrible. This part of Inner Mongolia is still called Tumed today. There are two parts, the Tumed left banner and the Tumed right banner. This monastery sits in the middle of them both. Now here in Inner Mongolia, of course, we are north of the Great Wall, and in the 16th century, south of the wall, was the Great Ming Dynasty of China. Altan Khan had a few little skirmishes with the Ming. He actually went over the wall a few times, laid siege to Beijing, and smashed some stuff up. Eventually, the Ming kind of, not gave in to him, but they accepted that he was a power to the north. Now eventually the Ming gave him the title Shunyi King, or Prince, a title he was the first to hold, and later after him others held the same title, which gave him some recognition. He also started to pay some, you know, money to the Ming as kind of almost like a vassal, I suppose. Now with him and the Ming dynasty now having some kind of a relationship and not fighting anymore, he became interested in Tibetan Buddhism, and he invited a very senior member of the Gelug sect of Tibetan Buddhism, that's a yellow hat sect, to come and see him here. And at first this monk refused, but then later did arrive. His name was Sonam Gyatso, and he was a prominent figure, very young at the time as well. And Altan Khan at this time was an old man, in his 70s, I believe. I shouldn't say old, should I? My mum and dad are both in their 70s. I mean old for the 16th century. Sorry, mum and dad. So during his time here, Sonam Gyatso declared himself the reincarnation of the monk who had converted Kublai Khan to Tibetan Buddhism a few centuries earlier. The Mongol world was Tibetan Buddhist, during the Yuan dynasty. That was the Mongol dynasty of China. But after the collapse of the Yuan dynasty and the start of the Ming dynasty, actually the Mongols went back to their old shamanic ways. So they'd had a few hundred years, well, a couple of hundred years of kind of giving up on their Buddhist belief. Now that was all about to change. So as well as declaring himself the reincarnation of the monk who converted Kublai Khan, he also declared Altan Khan the reincarnation of Kublai Khan himself. I'm sure this pleased Altan Khan a lot. And as a result, Altan Khan then used a new title for Sonam Gyatso. He declared him Dalai Lama. Now, we know the connections with the Dalai Lamas and Tibet. Actually, the word Dalai comes from a Mongolian word, not a Tibetan word. And it was first used here. That was the first time it was given as a title by Altan Khan to Sonam Gyatso. Now, they then decided that actually before Sonam Gyatso, there were two other monks who had previously died and, in their belief, been reincarnated, and they named them posthumously as the first and second Dalai Lama. So Sonam Gyatso actually became the third Dalai Lama. If you're wondering who the fourth Dalai Lama was, it was Altan Khan's grandson. Now, was Altan Khan's grandson really the reincarnation of the previous Dalai Lama? Or was it a power play? That depends on your belief, of course, and I'm not going to put my oar in on what I think about that. However, it's an interesting situation we have now, and the ramifications of this decision were huge. Towards the end of Altan Khan's lifetime, most of the Tibetan world became Buddhist over the course of about 50 years. Basically, Buddhism spread like wildfire here, Tibetan Buddhism. Lamaseries were built, temples, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of monks. This created a pretty useful situation for the Gelug sect of Tibetan Buddhism, because now they had an incredibly powerful ally in the Mongols, who this time was still an incredible fighting force and had a huge army. So fast forward a little bit to 1642, and under the fifth Dalai Lama, the Mongols invaded Tibet. The ruling class in Tibet were the Tsangpa dynasty, and they were overthrown by the Mongols, you know, along with obviously the Gelug sect of Tibetan Buddhism. Now, the whole political and spiritual landscape of Tibet changed. The Tsangpas were out, they were gone, and suddenly the new ruler of Tibet were the Dalai Lamas. Now, the Dalai Lamas were not only the spiritual leaders, but also the political leaders as well. They had absolute control, and they did it at the hands of the Mongols. So all of this changed, the political changed, and to be honest, the religious changed, because even today the Gelug sect is the most powerful and prominent sect of Tibetan Buddhism. All comes down to that meeting between Altan Khan and Sonam Gyatso. His legacy is huge, Altan Khan. I mean, he changed a huge amount of religious belief across a vast area, across Mongolia, Tibet, and even in obviously places like southern Gansu and Qinghai province. So all of this stems back to that meeting with Altan Khan and Sonam Gyatso. The titles they conferred upon each other spread Tibetan Buddhism and ultimately changed the entire system in Tibet itself. Very, very interesting character. And if you're from here, this part of China, Tumud, or if you're from Hohot, of course it's a name that everybody will know. He is the founder of that city, Hohot, and ruled this exact part of China. However, if you are not from here, it might be a name that you're not very familiar with. Altan Khan. There's my history, over. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. It's been a good one, you know. I've kind of had such a good day. It's my first day in Inner Mongolia already, you know, in the mountains, looking at ancient temples and talking about old Khans. Anyway, until next time, guys, I'll see you in Hohot. That is where the next video is going to be. All the best, take care, and stay safe. Bye.